we want to do? We want to come up with a concept, and with our concept, we will be designing our project, having information that we would hope to see in our project. So the first thing that we need to do as we are designing our project is to maybe come up with a title, like I said yesterday. Okay, we've got our guys. Now I need you to have just my voice and your question. I'm recording this for you guys so that you have a copy of it. Okay, so let's have the title. The title that we want to do is maybe we want to have some sort of record system. So we can then call this our project. No, let's not put it as project. Let's call it rentals update system. Okay, whereby we are then going to be saying we want to be able to work with rentals. We want to be able to put how our rentals can be done, some of the things that we need in our rentals, etc. So we'll build it as we go along, and we take it from there. Okay, was that a question? I saw a hand. Let me just try and make this a bit larger so that as I'm projecting, you can see the text clearer. Okay, let's make it like that. Although the larger it is, the tougher it will be for us to do certain things. So, first things first, some of the things that we learned along the way was working with variables. So we now need to create variables for certain things. Okay, since we said we want to have it as a set of elements that we want. I was hoping to get a notepad within code blocks, but let me use the opposite one and we can have our notes there. We said we want to create, we want to update, we want to edit, we want to delete, we also might want to search. Okay, although this is optional, this is not mandatory, optional, and then we'd also want to close. So these are some of the things that we would want in our project. So the first thing that we want to work with is our variable. Okay, to get our variables, we do the following. We need to figure out how each element will be working. Okay, so the first set of variables that we need are for our menu. Okay, so the first thing we have is a menu, and then we need to have the variables that we will use for our menu so that we can be able to choose certain things. So choice then means we need to have selection, control statements. There were control statements. Okay. At the same time, we also then need to have functions. So we need variables, we need control statements, we need functions. Those are the three elements that we need to work with. So when we come to our code blocks, we then now need to create those elements in a specific order. So with our variables, we start with a local variables and global variables. So the first thing that we need is to figure out where our variables go. If we are to create a function, the function must be able to get those variables. If we are to create a local variable, which will be in this particular instance within these brackets. So this is our function int main, our brackets, and then our variables would be where my cursor is. But if we are to put global variables, for example, let's say for our choice, we then put it as int r. Okay, this then becomes a variable for our choice. This is a global variable, so we can put like that, so that our I becomes a variable that we will use for our specific choice, option, or whatever element we want to use. At the same time, we also need to create our function menu, where we would need to put the brackets and a data type like that. So line number 4 gives us void menu, and then our menu becomes what we want to work with within our function. So when we call our menu in our main, we simply put menu, and then we have opening and closing brackets. So these are some of the things that you have in your videos that you did not go through. So if you go through your videos, you actually get to see that we've got variables, we've got functions. So when you're doing it this way now, you're now actually applying what we have learned and using that as a basis for creating your own project. So this also makes it a little bit easier for you, because as you're following this, you can be able to pick up from what we've got in this video and doing your own project as it stands. So I'm going to move a little bit faster. You can stop me wherever you've got questions or you need me to go over, so that we can work together. So let's also put a comment there and we state that and say function variable. Okay, so we now want to use this information that we've got there within a function. So we want to create the menu function. Okay, we then copy void menu as it is, control copy, control paste. So void menu is now on our line 11. But if it's a function now, we need to have these curly brackets like we've got on line 6 and line 9. And then we need to put whatever content we need to put within our menu within the curly brackets. So I can come at line 12, create my curly brackets, and then I have a function called menu. From there, we then want to use the options that we want. So like we have stated there, we said we want to create, update, edit, delete, search, and close. These are some of the options that we want to actually work and edit. So as we are also doing this, we are taking note of the progress that we are doing. So as you are working with it, wherever you start or whatever it is that you will do, make sure that you've got the logic right. And if you fail to complete the task, it does not mean you will not get some marks. So as you're doing each task and referring back to me, I'll be marking your work until you submit the project. So if you're not giving me your work as you're working on it, I will not be able to give you marks. So as we're working on it, I'll be giving you marks as we go. So let's get into our menu. So the first thing we need to do is work with our printf. Our printf gives us the following. We want the first element, which is create record. Okay, for lack of a better word, which will be 1. The next element would be printf. Again, we want to have the next one, which was edit. Okay, edit, which is the same as update. So let's not actually have it as two separate options. We have another printf. Our printf gives us the next value, which will be delete. The next one will be our printf, and we want a search. And then the next one is a printf. We want 5, which will be closed. And it. So like that, we would have pretty much done our menu. And if we run it, we should be able to see something displayed. So if I run my project, okay, it gives me that process return 0, execution time. Press any key to continue. It was supposed to give me the menu. I'm not sure why it didn't give me the menu. Okay, let's just go through our code again. Menu. It's not displaying our menu, but our code is correct. Let's proceed. I'm sure we'll figure out why it's not displaying our menu. Let's see if we comment this out. It will still give us the same results. Okay, there's something missing in our code, but I think we can figure it out as we go. I just need us to have the basic layout of our project, and then we'll fix the error as we go along. So one such error is referred to as a syntax error, because there'll be something missing in your syntax that would prevent your code from actually executing what you are hoping to get. Okay, so let us proceed. The next thing we want to then have after this is a input. So we have a scanf. Our scanf gets the following, which is a %d, and we want to use the variable that we have declared, which was I. That's our variable. So we then get our I, and then we want to use that as our starting point. So scanf gets our input, printf gives us output. So I'm sure for some of you who are actually working on it as we are doing it, you might be getting a different result. We'll get to that as we proceed, but we're just getting the code structure that is there. We'll fix the code as we go along, because this is now what you might need to actually work with to do your own particular project. Okay, So the next bit we want to do is we had said after doing this, we need to have a control statement, okay? Where our control statement helps us select the option that is there or the option that we want to work with. So the easiest select statement we can work with is a switch case. Switch case statement where we want to be able to switch the case of I or the value of I at any given point in time and yes, these ones are. Um, okay. Uh-huh. The I anatuko that ana 23. So I'm not sure I'm funny that I missed it. We have missed somewhere, somewhere in our code. We could have missed something minor. But we will get to it because we want to just put a little bit of code and then fix it as we proceed. Okay. So let's get into the next set. The next set would be just our case statement, where each case statement will have the keyword case, uh, the value of the case statement, and the column. Okay. So the first case will be case number 1. We break each case statement with a break, and then we put the content we want between the case and the break. Okay. So we then put the following. Say at this particular point, we want a printf that just tells us that this is for the print. Sorry, this is for the create, like that. And then we need to work on the next case statement, which will be case number 2. We also have a break. We want a case number 3. We also want a break. Let me go back to case number 2 so that we put a printf as well. We want a printf that tells us that this is for our edit. And for case number 3, this is for our delete. This is edit. And this is for our delete. And then the next one is our case number 4, where we want to be able to put search. We also have a break. And then the last one is case number 5. We have a printf. And with our printf, we want to be able to close the program. Close program. Okay, like that. Then lastly, we have a break. And then we have a default. Okay, so for our default, we want to be able to tell the user that they have entered invalid option. Entered invalid selection, like that. Okay, so the moment we have done this, we then want to go back to our menu. So we want to be able to call our menu, which is a function. Okay, So now we've added a little bit more information to what we had previously. And maybe we might need to just go through some of that step by step. Okay, we have created our void menu from line 11. We've also got our curly brackets, which then means we have created our function well. From there, we have a printf create record, which is just an output. Printf edit and update, which is another output. Printf delete, printf search, printf close. Okay. From there, we then want to have input. So scanf is our input. Okay. Since it's getting our input, we just want to be able to get the value of I, and then that value of I is what we switch in our switch case statement. So we then get that option for I, and then we've got our case statements: case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4, and case 5. And then we've got a default element, which is you have entered an invalid selection and we want to reroute to our menu. Okay. Whilst we are also doing this, we can also be able to troubleshoot. So, like for example, if I run it and it's still giving me the error that we were not expecting, which is this one, it then means somewhere along the lines in this build log at the bottom there could be an error that we could have missed, or an error that we did not actually recognize as an error. So as it stands, it's not giving us an error. So it means somewhere in our syntax, we could have missed a specific element. So to test that, we need to go through each and every line and see what could be the problem. So this line is okay, because if we highlight that, we get to realize that it's an int value, and that is okay. I is okay because it's our variable. Void menu is also okay. Our brackets are matching. Int main is okay. Our menu is also okay. One way of testing to see if our menu is okay is we type out menu, and then it shows us this pop-up that comes out. So it means our menu is also fine and we have called it properly. Let's just put a printf to test this as well to see if that is also displaying well. We call this rentals update system, like that. So we actually just want to test whether our main is executing okay. Let's close this and run it. Okay, it's also not giving us the output that we want. Let's try rebuilding the solution. Okay, not a problem. We can just test it online, see whether we've got our code in order, so that we see that our logic is correct. I'm not sure why it's not giving us what we are expecting. For those working on your computers, are you getting the same output as I'm getting? If you run it, I'm sure you've got everything in order. Just run it and test. Yes. Okay. So I'm just hoping to get an online IDE so that you can see that you can get errors where my code is exactly the same as some of your other code, but it's not running here. If I run it, it's giving me just a blank screen, although it's not supposed to be giving me a blank screen. It's supposed to be giving me something else. So let's just see if IDE1 opens up quickly enough. Yes. Okay, let me just show you uh, on the same screen so that at least you can be able to follow when you're by yourselves. Okay, so I'm just going to copy the code, all of it, and then paste it here so that we test and you see the output. Okay, whilst you're waiting, let's just add some more content to this. So if you can follow some of the videos that were there or some of the things that I sent, you actually then get to realize that we created a number of functions. For example, on line 4, we've got void menu. And then outside of void menu, which was like line 4 is a function variable, line 12 is the actual function that will be working. Okay, so it then means that with each and every one of these options, we can actually create functions. Or if we don't want to create functions, we can actually work with what is known as a go-to statement, where we'll be able to select that at any given point in time, we go to a specific statement that gives us the code that we want to work with. So I personally prefer working with functions because functions make life a little bit easier. Although in some cases they might give us problems, but like we said, we are here to learn so that we know what each element is doing. So I'm sure by now this is done. Okay. So in this particular option, it's just gonna give me this display, but this shows us that our code is actually working. So it gives us, I'm sure I can increase the size of this so that you see what the output was. It gives us Reptiles update system, where the first option is create a record, the second option is edit or update, the next option is delete, the next option is search, the next option is close. Okay, so at this particular point, we're then supposed to get an input. So the input gives us whatever it is that we are hoping to get outside of this particular system. So we can be able to edit, right? And then when we're editing, I can be able to then put some input. So you might have to excuse me because if my internet is a bit on the slow side, so it takes a while to get through to what we want to do. So for example, we've got options which is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So I might want to put an input. Let's say I put my input as 3, and then I come here and I run it again. The output should now be different from when I started. So this was the first output that I've got. Whilst I wait for it to finish, it gives me the next output of what it is that we are doing at this particular point. So whilst we wait, we can proceed. Okay, now I got an error. I'm not sure why I got it. Okay, right. This will confuse you. Let me not work with the online. It will confuse you. Okay, so let us proceed to creating a function. Creating of functions then works like this. We want to create a function for create. Okay, so we type out void create. Create should be a keyword, so I don't think it can work as just create. So maybe we can actually type out RUS create. For rental update systems, create, which then means we've also created the second function. So this is function to create. From there, we then want to use our function create in two instances. The first instance is to actually call our function create in our case 1. So soon after create value, we then want to call function create. Soon after this menu, we also want to put a comment and say create function. And then we want to have void. We then have our create function. We've got our curly brackets. So make sure that you've got your curly brackets for the function. Make sure you've got your normal brackets for the declaration of the function. So this then becomes the function body. This then becomes the function call. This then becomes the function declaration, where we're actually declaring it as a variable. So we've got function create, where we can be able to actually call it in our case 1, where we want to create a value, and we've got our function call. So we can do that for the rest of the functions that we want to have. So we've got edit, we've got delete, we've got search, we've got close. So since close, search, delete, edit, or even update are keywords, we also use RUS before each declaration so that we can be able to see how this works. So we're just creating the shell of what our project should be, or what our project must be able to do. So at the end of the day, it would then make it slightly easier for you to then fit in certain things whereby you're just now going to look for what can go within your project, and you do exactly that. So let's move on to the next um, set of functions that we need to create. The next function we need to also create is a void RUS edit. and then this is a function to edit content. We do the same, we copy Rust edit and we put it under our edit value like that. We also come to the bottom and we then put a comment to say edit function. So we then put void, we paste our content, and then from there we have our edit function. And it. So we've got two functions created now, where we've got our create and our edit. And you need to also make sure that each element is actually where it's supposed to be. So with our case one, we've got our printf, which gives us create value, and then we call our function Rust create, which is our function call, and then we've got our break so that we break outside of that particular function. Okay, so now we're going to add a little bit more content to our work so that we can be able to see how some of these things work. So we are saying we want to be able to update rental. So there are certain things that we might need to have as quickly as is possible, because we're saying we want to update our rentals. Okay, so what this then means is we want to be able to either create a tenant or to create a rental update. So there's two options that we can actually work with. We might either want to create a new tenant, or we might want to be able to create a rental update. Why am I specifying them in the two separate options? We are saying if it's a new tenant, we might need to add them to our system. If it's an existing tenant, we might want to update their rentals. So in other words, we then need to figure out which element we want to actually concentrate on. Or we can actually have them as both. To say, if it's a new client, we specify, do you want to create a new client? If it's an existing client, do you want to update the rentals of an existing client? So what that then means now, since we are starting from scratch, we've got no clients whatsoever. We've got no rentals whatsoever. So how do we then do that? So to note would be new rental or update existing rental. So in other words, we're then saying these are the options that we need to actually work with. So how then do we do it? Are we saying when we are creating, we want to always be updating? Or are we saying when we are creating, we want to then be able to do both? So it now then depends on you how you'd want to do it. Okay? So since it's a rental update system, we want to be able to update rentals. Or we can actually do it in a slightly different way. We can have a property as the value that we're working with. To say property number 10 in Harare Street, we want to be able to have its rental. Then the property itself becomes the element that we work with. And then the tenant changes. So in other words, we are actually creating a rental for a specific property, but the tenants are changing. Or we can actually then have records of the individual tenants and then have many tenants. You see where it then becomes tricky. So when you're working with your designing of the system, these are some of the things that we're actually talking about and you'll be taking note of as you proceed. Okay, so maybe what would be easier is to actually work with the property. So if we're working with the property, we then do it as follows. We then say name of property. Okay, tenant name, date of occupation, rental agreed, deposit, charged, and then outstanding balance, like that. So in other words, what are we saying? We are saying we want to be able to figure out what we would need to create for our particular system. Since we said it's a rentals update system, we need to at least know what exactly we need to focus on. So we've got the property, we've got the tenant name, we've got the date of occupation, we've got the rental agreed, we've got the deposit charged, we've got the outstanding balance, if there's an outstanding balance. Okay, we might also need to have a record whereby we are saying at any given point in time, we might have a change in rental. Okay, so we might also need to put that there. Or, yes, name of property, tenant name, date of occupation, rental agreed, deposit charged, outstanding balance. Okay, so why are we putting them in this particular order? We are saying at any given point in time we do an agreement. You come to me, I am a University of Zimbabwe computer school, and then you come to me and then tell you my fees is X amount. I need it before you start. You then tell me, okay, X amount is fine, but I don't have X amount. Can I have a payment plan or payment scheme? So in other words, we're then saying it's the same with the property. I might give you a property and say, I want you to rent, but I need a deposit. So I give you my deposit and my rent. Usually it's pretty much 1 to 1, or 1 to 2, or 1 to 3, whatever agreement we have. So my rental can be $300, my deposit can also be $300. You decide to say, I want to get into a property, but I've got $400. So if I've got $400, it then means you'll be paying for rent. So I update and say they've paid for rent. Deposit, they didn't pay all of it. So hence, since they didn't put all of it, there's an outstanding, which is outstanding balance to what they are supposed to pay. So the next time that they pay, they'll also be paying rent plus the outstanding, so that we can be able to capture everything that we need for that particular a property or that particular agreement to be in place. So this is then how you start analyzing some of the things that I spoke to you about yesterday. To say, as you are developing your system, you need to figure out what exactly you want to do. So what you want to do has to be as clear as is possible. So as we are doing this now, we can then be able to say, okay, these are some of the things that I've found, and I think they're critical in my creating a system. But you might find that there's an error somewhere that you also need to fix. So hence, that's why it is then sequential. Each and every element that you're working with, you might need to go back to it and figure out how you can correct it or change it. And it. So given these elements, I can copy exactly as they are. I come to my create, I paste them like that. So these are the elements that I want to have in my create. So I want the name of the property, I want the tenant's name, I want the date of occupation, I want the rental agreed, I want the deposit charged, I want the outstanding balance. We can work with these, although we might change them as we proceed. Okay, so let's put these in printf statements so that we know what we would want to do. Like that. We also put our codes so that everything is in order. We do the same for the rest of the content. Right. So this is half the battle. It's not yet complete, but this is how we work with our coding. Like I said, if you don't have glasses yet, you haven't started coding. But if you have glasses, then you are somewhere there. Although I still don't like wearing them, but tomorrow's lesson I will try and bring them. Like I said, keyword try. Okay, so we'll then have the following, right? If I can just finish up for the purposes of you who are following, and you see what each element does. We would want to go to the next section, which is now variables for these options, or variables for these elements that we want to work with. So we've got our deposit, we've got our outstanding balance, we've got our rental agreed, date of occupation, name, etc. Okay, these are the options that we will be having to add. And so at this particular point, we now need to implement something that is also based on the videos that we have done. So lack of you going through those videos means you are going to be behind, because you need to go through each of the videos and learn what we are supposed to do. So there's three aspects that we're going to introduce here. And these three aspects, hopefully, will not be confusing as we are doing them now. The first aspect is to actually create multiple variables. The second aspect is to work with files. The next aspect is to actually save and have a record of whatever it is that we would have created. So how do we do that? The first thing that we then need to do is we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements. These elements need to be stored in a set or in a group of variables. How do we do that at this particular point? At this point, we then now need to come outside of our menu, outside of our function create, and maybe we can actually put it just after these declarations. Okay, so what we need to do now is also work with something called a struct. It's also in the video. Our struct then gives us values. That is the name that we'll call our struct, where we then want to put these elements. So now we want to have variables that match to this. So name of property, we can then put it as, it's a character, NOP, which is name of property, We put it as 20. We want the name of tenant, so it's a character. NOT, name of tenant, and then we put it as 20, like that. So we'll just work with two values for now, where we've got our structure, which will then give us our variable. So our variables will be name of property and name of tenant. Let's put comments so that we don't forget that. Name of property, and then name of tenant, like that. And so in this particular instance, we've got our variable. So how do we reference our variables within our function? We then now need to call our structure, and we call it within our create, so that we can see how we use our structure in a particular function. So we then come to line 54, and we call struct values, and then we need an identifier to be able to use our values. So we call it CR, be able to create our values. At the same time, if we want to add the two values, or to add the two values, here's how we'll do it. For the scanf, we put our quotations, %s for our string, we put a comma, we then call CR, and then we get name of property, which is NOP, like that. That is how we'll do it. Yes. Okay. On the structure, I'll come back and explain how it's working. We come to this particular point, which was line 7. So let me actually put it as structure, struct. And then what our structure is, it's just a keyword that we can put several variables into. So we use the keyword struct, and then the name that we have called it is values. So values then has the curly bracket. So the opening bracket and the closing bracket, and then a semicolon to signify that it's a struct. Then we then put the names of the variables that we want. So character NOP becomes the name of the property. Character NOT becomes the name of the tenant. So these are the two variables that we've got in our structure. If we then come back to our function create, our function create, we can then be able to call the structure, which is struct, and then the values, which was the name of the structure, that is the one we created in line 8, and then CR becomes our identifier for the values that are in values. Yes. Okay. A structure now is necessary because we create one value with multiple values. If we didn't want to have a one value, we then need to create individual variables. So the variables are, as we progress, we might have more than 20 variables. So with the structure, it makes it easier for you to just be able to call on the structure and call a particular variable. So for example, in line 56, then if I type out CR and I put my period, I can be able to see name of property and name of tenant in one variable. So it then means the more variables that I add to my structure, I can now just be able to reference and pick the variable that I want to use. they can be the same data type, they can be different data types. Because now, if we're working with a variable, it's just of one data type, but within a structure, we can have more than one data type in the structure. Okay, so let's do the next scanf, and I open up for questions because I think we would have covered more than we should have in this particular session, but at least we've got somewhere to start. So this becomes name of tenant like that. And if you type out a period and you don't see any of these values, it then means your structure declaration was not done properly. So are there any questions or people who got left behind somewhere? Yes. Okay, Chiditese. Yes. Mhm. You could have missed something while you were typing.